Welcome back. All right, so now we're going to talk about the Boston Bruins. Eliminated last night, so they're out of the playoffs, and all the Centennial gear I've been wearing during the season and these wonderful Centennial jerseys get shelved. We'll see if maybe they keep this one as a third, but either way, this is a team that has now failed to get out of the second round every season since they made it to the Stanley Cup final in 2019. So 2019, 2020, coming off of that Stanley Cup final appearance, they finished 44, 14, and 12. That was the record at the time of the pause. 100 points. They did finish first in the NHL that year, which led to a second round ouster at the hands of the Tampa Bay Lightning in 5 games. Tampa Bay's been a bad matchup for Boston. There were definitely those who speculated that they didn't play well down the stretch because they didn't want Tampa Bay. I think they just didn't play well down the stretch. I don't think there was some kind of 4D chess thing going on. But either way, if they'd played Tampa Bay in the first round, would they've got past them? I don't know. Probably, but who knows? Then in 2020, 2021, they finished 33, 16, and 7. That's where you're just playing against your own division, of course. 73 points, and that year they lost in the second round against the Islanders. That time, it was in 6 games. Considered an upset at the time, but again, second round's been an issue for Boston. 2021, 2022, they don't get to the second round. The regular season was very good. 51, 26, and 5 record, 107 points, but they lost in 7 games against Carolina in the first round. Remember being pretty frustrated at the end of that first round loss by Boston. They just couldn't get over the hump. Then last year, 2022, 2023, fantastic regular season for the Boston Bruins. A record of 65, 12, and 5, 135 points, setting all kinds of records. And then it doesn't matter. They get a 3-1 series lead on Florida. They lose the next 3 games, and the series was done in 7. Coming into this season, my expectations for Boston were lowered quite a bit. I did feel like there was this kind of magical essence of the team from the year before, which some of that is lost when Bergeron's not in the lineup, because I felt like, Boston should go on a run. It's Bergeron's last year. They should be able to go on a run, just, use that for inspiration. It just didn't happen. This year they finished 47, 20, and 15, 109 points. And then they lose in the second round against that same Florida team in 6. Last year, one could argue that, well, they choked against Florida. I can't argue they didn't. But this year, it felt different. It just felt like Florida was just the better team. For all of the arguments and all of the aggravation that Bruins fans have had with the officiating, I understand people getting frustrated with officials, but at the same time, to me, the really good teams were able to overcome some bad calls here and there, and Boston just wasn't able to overcome the Florida Panthers in the end. So that's 2 straight seasons they've lost against Florida, and it leaves them kind of, I don't know, they're in that no man's land where they're a pretty good team, but they need to improve. And the first thing that, if I was Don Sweeney, I'd be looking at is the impossibility of trying to figure out how to replace what they lost with Bergeron and Krejci. Bergeron and Krejci as your first 2 centers. I mean, face-offs with Bergeron, fantastic. And they didn't really have that this year. But we'll come back to that. So Pastrnak leads the team in scoring, 82 games, 47 goals, 63 assists, 110 points. He was their offense. So when I see people in the comments from basically during these playoffs like, Pastrnak needs to be better, and I've even seen that from some pundits online and some media people. But who was he playing with? And I don't mean that facetiously or sarcastically. Just Marchand had a down year offensively, 29 goals, 38 assists, 67 points in 82 games. So he's second on team scoring with 67 points. Pastrnak has 110. So Pasternak's out there creating offense himself. So if you're against Boston, what do? You neutralize Pastrnak. Makes Boston relatively easy to shut down offensively. Coyle was third on the team in scoring, 82 games, 25 goals, 35 assists, 60 points. He was their first line center. I think Charlie Coyle went out and did the best that he could. I do not view Charlie Coyle as being really first line center. And I say that because he really wasn't before this season at the National Hockey League level. And center position is something that the Bruins are going to have to work on in the offseason. Now, 22 and younger players that appeared for this team this year, just 2. But I'm excited about both. Poitras, I'm excited about. He finished the season on injured reserve, but 33 games, 5 goals, 10 assists, 15 points. If Poitras could be healthy right out of training camp, I think he's going to have every opportunity to succeed. He showed a lot of Bergeron light qualities. Like, he's not Bergeron, but there's definitely some good two-way game there. There's definitely some good creative offense there. Poitras may very well be a home run for this team soon. Johnny Beecher, I think he's good. I think he's probably going to top out as a third line center. 52 games, 7 goals, 3 assists, 10 points. But it does raise the question of who's their number one center next season. If you want Pastrnak to succeed in the playoffs, you've got to give him somebody down the middle who can work. Now, I mean, if Tavares was younger and if the cap hit wasn't so high, that could absolutely work, but the cap hit's a little bit high, and he is a little bit on the older side. I don't see that necessarily being a good fit. But finding a center is, I think, important for Boston. Just look at the face-off win percentage in the playoffs. Charlie Coyle, 48%. Pavel Zacha, 47.4%. Morgan Geekie, 45.8%. Johnny Beecher, 47.6%. Frederick, 33.3%. 60 face-offs minimum to get onto this list here, meaning these are the 5 guys who were taking routine face-offs, and none of them were at 50%. So you have a Boston team where Pasternak's your main guy. He does not play center, and more often than not, you're chasing the puck rather than possessing the puck to start the play. Anytime I talked up Bergeron, I talked up the fact that, when he's out there, you're going to have the puck first. He can help dictate play. They did not have the center that could do that this year. It's part of the reason why when I was trying to figure out, for season previews, like where do I think Boston's going to finish, I actually cowered it out of that. If anybody paid attention during the season previews, I didn't actually try to pick where anybody was going to finish. And Boston was tough because I saw this weakness down the middle, and I didn't see a center that I felt like could run the game. Again, you're not going to replace Bergeron. It's impossible. But they didn't have somebody to step into that first-line center spot. So again, you're against Boston. What do? Just neutralize Pastrnak. You can double cover him. Who cares? If you've got a choice between leaving Pastrnak with, one guy on him coverage, or Charlie Coyle with one, or if you're going to double cover Pastrnak and just go, all right, we'll see if Coyle can hurt us. Well, you double cover on Pastrnak. Just shut him down. And Florida did that well. I thought Florida did that quite well. Now, goaltending is going to be a question mark in the offseason, too. So, Jeremy Swayman, 25, 10, and 8, 916 save percentage. He is their starter now. Ullmark is probably on his way out the door. 22, 10, and 7 record, 915 save percentage. I was not on board with him going out the door during the regular season. At the trade deadline, I felt like that was an unnecessary move. But this summer, I think it's probably the right move. For salary cap reasons, it makes sense. Ullmark does not have a cap hit that is difficult for other teams to take on, but freeing up a little bit extra money might be the right move for Boston this year, whether it's to bring guys back or entice a free agent in. Maybe they can find a free agent out there that's going to help them offensively, because goal scoring, not always fantastic for Boston this year. Bit more of a struggle for them, and they had to play some kind of boring style of hockey for most of the season, which worked and got them points. But in the playoffs, when you're against the really good teams, it's hard to shut them down in a best-of-7 series. So their pending UFA list is a long list. It starts with Jake DeBrusk. Now, I remember when Bruce Cassidy left, part of the reasoning was that DeBrusk wanted out because Cassidy was there, and then they got rid of Cassidy, so they kept DeBrusk. I mean, I love Jim Montgomery as the coach. I have no complaints about Montgomery as the coach. I still look back at that and think that's kind of a head scratcher. There had to be something else with Cassidy that caused him to be sent to Vegas, where he won the Stanley Cup right away. Anyways, Danton Heinen, pending UFA as well. I wouldn't mind seeing them keep Heinen around. I thought he had a good year. Maroon, just a rental of the deadline. Van Riemsdyk, I wouldn't be surprised if Van Riemsdyk retires. Magna just played a couple games for them. Forbert, decent depth defenseman. Totally understand if they move on from him. Grzelcyk, I'd like to see them keep Grzelcyk. They really missed him in this series. A lot of talk about the defensemen and how things were going for Boston in these playoffs, but they didn't have Grzelcyk, they didn't have Shattenkirk, they didn't have Forbert. You're really up against it. Shattenkirk's a pending UFA this summer, and Milan Lucic, who only played 4 games for Boston. It was not the triumphant return he'd hoped for. His career very likely finishes up with this season. Pending restricted free agents, you've got Boquist, who I think was solid as a fourth liner, and Swayman. Swayman's going to get paid. So currently the cap space they'll have on July the 1st is $20,909,166, according to Cap Friendly. Swayman is going to eat up, I would say, about $7 million of that. I'd be very surprised if it's less than $7 million. Swayman is going to be a Vezina winner at some point. And it's just been remarkable to watch his growth as a goaltender. He's gone from a guy that a couple years ago fans might have been kind of nervous about in a key game, but now there's no nerves at all about Swayman, and he is one of the best goaltenders in the National Hockey League. So moving on from Ullmark makes some sense financially. It also makes some sense in that now Swayman's ready to be the main guy. I'm going to be sad if we lose the goalie hug, but what's to say that Ullmark's replacement won't still do the goalie hug with Swayman? Like, I feel like now that's going to be a Boston staple, and it should stay. So I want to keep the goalie hug. I don't know that there's going to be a lot of hugs next year because I don't know if this team's going to get better, if they're going to fall off a little bit. I have no idea. So their top prospect, Fabian Lysell, and he's been coming along, I'm not going to say slowly, but they're not rushing him. I'll put it that way. But he's a winger, so while there's some offense there, he was right around a point per game in the AHL this year. He doesn't project to be a guy who's going to play in the middle of the ice, obviously, and doesn't fix that issue with their center spot. Now, their general manager, Don Sweeney, there is always an undercurrent within Boston fandom that he should be fired. No matter how the team's playing, no matter how many games the team wins, there'll still be Bruins fans saying, yeah, they won that game 6-0 last night. Can we fire Don Sweeney? I swear they could win the Stanley Cup and somebody go, you know what? I think they won this despite Don Sweeney. Can we fire Don Sweeney now that we won the Cup? Anyways, I do understand some of the dislike for Sweeney. I don't share in it necessarily. I'm not on the fire Sweeney side of things. This summer he has a tough job. He has a tough job to figure out how to turn this team into potentially being a Cup favorite again, and then have the ability to get over the hump come playoff time. Again, Coach Jim Montgomery, I've seen some calls for him to be out too at certain points during the playoffs. I don't go for that. I do think that, great, now I got Hall & Oates stuck in my head, but I did it to myself, obviously. But Montgomery, I thought, did well. I was kind of upset at the too many men on the ice call that the Bruins were getting, and they were legit. Like, they kept showing on the replays, like, yeah, no, there's 6 guys on the ice, there's 7 guys on the ice. The whole bench cleared. I don't know why everybody's out there. But yeah, Montgomery, I think he sticks around for at least another year. I think Montgomery's done a really good job. Plus, getting 109 points out of a roster where that's your center spot, that's nothing short of miraculous in my books. And they played a really good system. The problem is that system did not work against the Florida Panthers. Now, draft picks, they're light on draft picks this year. They don't have a draft pick until round 4. They have a 4th, a 5th, and a 6th. They don't have a 7th round pick either. Next year, they don't have a 2nd or a 4th round pick. And then in 2026, they don't have a 6th round draft pick. I am formally requesting that Boston stop trading draft picks, stop trading future assets, and start acquiring future assets with the idea of not going into a rebuild, but the idea that you're going to need more young players to complement some of this team. Now, one reason why I don't think that any kind of rebuild is necessary, this is a relatively young team. Now, one thing to keep an eye on for this upcoming season, too, that I wanted to touch on is Brad Marchand is a UFA in 2025. I totally expect him to stick with the Boston Bruins. I would expect they may very well announce an extension with him as soon as July the 1st, but it is something to keep an eye on because we'll see what his cap hit looks like. But in terms of players in their prime, and so these are players 22 and younger, but from 23 to 27, well, with 23 to 27, you've got Pastrnak, you've got Zacha, Frederick, Geekie, Beecher, Lauko, Brazeau. Brazeau was, I think, pretty solid call-up by them this year. Boquist, DeBrusk, who again may very well be on his way out the door. McAvoy, young defenseman, and one of the better defensemen in the NHL. Carlo, Peak, Lowry. Lowry was quite the find for them this year, too. Wotherspoon, and for all of the complaints about Wotherspoon's play that I've seen at times here, he's a depth defenseman. He's only on an $850,000 cap hit next year. And so this summer they can go out, they can get other defensemen or keep the guys they have, and he'll be either playing in Providence to start the year or he'll be a healthy scratch to start the year. But there's Swayman. Swayman is 25 years of age. He's just starting to get into his prime as a goaltender. And so I do think there's enough here for Boston that a rebuild or retool completely unnecessary. One thing I will give Don Sweeney credit for is that he has managed to keep a large portion of the roster as younger-ish players. While we've seen some teams getting grayer and grayer, Boston really hasn't done that. So we'll see how things go this summer. Again, there's cap space there, but keep in mind there's a lot of players they have to either re-sign or players that they're going to have to try to entice to come in, because again, I don't think playing with that same center spot would necessarily work. And so we'll see what happens next season. But that being said, I'd be interested to know your thoughts on the Boston Bruins and the road forward. Let me know your thoughts on that. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. Thank you guys so much for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.